In 1866, King Kamehameha V banished all men, women, and children with leprosy to the isolated north shore of Molokai. This isolation law remained in effect until its repeal in 1969. Since then, more than 8,000 people have died at KALAUPAPA, the leprosy settlement on Molokai, including my grandfather, Keiichi Yasuda. Leprosy, the horrific disease of biblical proportions, arrived in Hawaii by merchant sailors in the 1840s. The disease became epidemic. There arose a fearful panic that Hawaii would become a bastion of leprosy, and this spurred the authorities to take harsh action. Starting in 1866, anyone suspected of having a telltale skin blemish was processed as a criminal. The person was arrested, and those convicted of leprosy were put on a boat and dropped off at KALAUPAPA, the leprosy settlement on Molokai. No one could escape the 2,000-foot-high cliffs or the shark-infested ocean. They were left to spend the rest of their lives without any medical support, rule of law, or any further contact with family. Why were almost 8,000 people torn from their families and sent into isolation, which lasted for most of their entire lives? Options for preventing the disease of contagious diseases were few. Isolation for leprosy seemed like the best solution, but it came at a high personal price. One of the worst things about this illness is what was done to me as a young boy, recalled one resident. First, I was sent away from my family. That was hard. I was so sad to go to KALAUPAPA. They told me right out that I would die here, that I would never see my family again. I heard them say this phrase, something that I will never forget. This is your last place. This is where you're going to stay. This is where you're going to die. That's what they told me. I was a 13-year-old kid. The residents had some relief, however, when in 1873 missionaries began to move to the island and offered care and medical resources. Major improvements were made due to the arrival of Father Damien and the interest and strong support of the next two Hawaiian kings, William Charles Lunalilo and David Kalakaua. Father Damien had lived on Molokai for 12 years when it was confirmed that he had contracted Hansen's disease. Father Damien was just 49 years old when he died in 1889. Shortly before his death, he wrote to his brother, "I am gently going to my grave. It is the will of God, and I thank Him very much for letting me die of the same disease and in the same way as my lepers. I am very satisfied and very happy." He was buried in a cemetery next to his church, St. Philomena, on the settlement. In 2009, Damien was canonized a saint in the Catholic Church. His life of service to the sick and outcast continues to serve as an inspiration for people worldwide. As the ravages of leprosy unfolded, husbands were separated from their wives and children. Diseased children were removed from their mothers and fathers, and babies born to patients were immediately taken away by health officials. My grandfather, Keiichi Yasuda, was taken from his home and family in Honolulu while just a young man, put on a ship and dropped off on Molokai. I heard stories that the men, women, and children with leprosy had to swim to shore. By 1924, there were 485 patients remaining. The racial groups represented were 169 Hawaiian men, 101 Hawaiian women, 53 Port Hawaiian men, and 43 Port Hawaiian women, 28 Japanese men, 4 Japanese women, 24 Filipino men, and 1 Filipino woman. With the new drug therapies, Hansen's disease patients were no longer contagious. There was no further need for isolation. In 1969, the laws of forced quarantine were abolished. For over 100 years, Kalaupapa was home for people once ostracized and banished from society. My grandfather, Keiichi Yasuda, died in Kalaupapa in 1936. He was 55 years old. Years later, my aunt and Keiichi's daughter, Ruth Yasuda, had his ashes moved to Nu'uanu Cemetery in Honolulu, where he is buried next to my grandmother. I'll remember you long after this endless summer is gone. I'll be lonely, oh so lonely, living only to remember you.